Welcome to episode 6 of the Transformation Roadmap. If you're tuning in today hoping for a generic motivational chat or, a pep talk about finding your inner leader,
Yeah, you're going to be disappointed.
you are definitely going to be disappointed because today we are taking a completely different approach. We're looking at the human mind not as some mystical, unexplainable mystery, but as a machine.
A very brilliant, very complex machine.
Exactly. A machine with a specific operating system. It's got hardware that can be upgraded and code that you can actively rewrite.
That's right. And to really get into that, we are doing a deep dive today into an extraordinary field manual. It's called Human Potential Unlocked: NLP Strategies for Leaders in a Dynamic Workplace.
Which is just, it's incredibly dense.
Oh, it's a masterclass. It's written by Kanav Sakdev, the founder of the White Light System. And, he is a true behavioral architect.
Architect is absolutely the perfect word for him. Because this isn't a book about just, trying harder. It's a systematic blueprint. Our mission for this deep dive is to extract the most profound practical understandings of neuro-linguistic programming, or NLP, and apply them directly to leadership.
We're totally bypassing all that woo-woo stuff you might see on social media.
Right, all the fluff.
Right.
We are talking about precise, actionable, cognitive blueprints. But before we get into the weeds here, I want to be upfront with you. We are only going to be able to scratch the surface today.
Barely even a scratch, honestly.
Right. We're giving you the structural overview, but Sakdev's text is highly structured. To truly grasp the system and execute these protocols properly, owning the actual manual is an absolute necessity.
It really is. Think of today as us showing you the architectural rendering of a skyscraper. It looks great. It gives you the vision.
If you actually want to pour the concrete,
Exactly. If you want to build the foundation, you need the actual granular step-by-step blueprints that are in the book. He lays out dozens of specific linguistic syntaxes and timing protocols that we simply won't have the time to cover today.
but the high-yield protocols we are going to extract will completely change how you view your own daily habits.
Oh, absolutely. It changes your entire leadership style.
So let's start with the foundation. NLP has become a bit of a corporate buzzword over the last decade, but Sakdev strips all that jargon away and presents it literally as the operating system of the human mind. Let's break that acronym down.
Yeah, let's do it.
Neuro refers to your neural pathways, right? Your cognitive hardware.
The physical wiring.
Yes. Linguistic is the code. It's the actual language you use to program your reality. And programming refers to the automated scripts and those habitual loops that govern your daily actions.
And to understand how powerful this really is, you have to understand neuroplasticity. And I don't mean that vague biological concept you maybe heard about in high school. Sakdev frames neuroplasticity as active mental rewiring.
It's deliberate.
Completely deliberate. He uses this brilliant analogy in the text. He says, rewiring your brain is like a sculptor meticulously chiseling away at a block of marble. Or, maybe even more relevant for a leader today, it's like installing a massive update to your smartphone's operating system.
I love that.
Your brain isn't fixed. The hardware is physically altered by the software you choose to run.
Which takes so much pressure off the idea of personality. Like, it's not, I am just an anxious person. It's more like, I am currently running an anxiety program.
Yes.
Oh.
You're running corrupted code.
And the book gives a fantastic, very tangible example of this with a tech manager named Ananya. Let's talk about her.
Right, Amanya.
She operates in this incredibly high-pressure tech environment, and her default physiological response to rapid-fire questions from her executive board was pure panic.
Total fight or flight.
Exactly. Her neural pathways were literally wired so that an executive asking, "Why are these metrics down?" just automatically triggered a massive stress response.
Her system was just flooded with cortisol. Give it to someone like Ananya is usually just, well, take a deep breath and try to calm down.
Which does nothing.
It's incredibly ineffective when you're battling established neural pathways. You can't just wish the hardware away. Sakdev's approach is much more systematic. Ananya didn't just try to be calm. She used a targeted protocol.
Walk us through that protocol.
First, she identified her exact triggers. It wasn't just the meeting itself, it was the specific tone and the pacing of the executive questions. Then, she implemented a pre-meeting grounding sequence.
And this wasn't just, sitting cross-legged in her office meditating, right? What did that sequence actually look like mechanically?
It was highly physiological. She used specific breath regulation to physically lower her heart rate. She was essentially sending a manual override signal to her nervous system saying, we are not under physical attack right now.
Hacking the hardware.
Precisely. And she combined that with visualization. She mentally rehearsed the room, the faces of the executives, the pressure, and she paired it with highly specific affirmations.
Hmm.
By doing this repeatedly, she was physically rewiring her neural responses. Over time, that new code overwrote the panic code.
So she achieved poise under pressure not by just hoping for it, but by actively programming it.
She engineered it.
That distinction is so important, and that ties directly into a concept Socdev calls meta-programs and state management. If we stick with the computer analogy, meta-programs are the underlying subconscious filters that dictate your behavior,
They're the background applications.
running without your conscious permission and just draining your battery.
Yes.
State management, then, is learning how to access the physiological toggle switch to turn those background apps off. A leader has to learn to control this switch. You can't let your external environment dictate your internal state. You have to engineer your internal state to dictate how you respond to the environment.
It sounds simple when you say it out loud, but it is incredibly rare in practice. Most leaders are walking around operating on whatever default factory settings they acquired in their 20s.
Running outdated software.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They react to a crisis today with the same unoptimized code they were handed years ago. Sachdev's manual essentially provides the root access required to go into your own mind and change that code.
Which perfectly segues into how we actually write that code. Let's shift gears and talk about the linguistic architecture, the power of words and internal dialogue. The book introduces the concept of linguistic relativity, and this honestly blew my mind a bit.
It's a heavy concept.
It really is. It's the idea that words do not just describe your reality after the fact, they actively construct your reality in real time.
And this is where the data gets genuinely staggering. The clinical research cited in Sachdev's text shows that the human mind processes between 50,000 to 70,000 thoughts every single day.
Every single day.
Every day. And the data shows that the vast majority of these, for the average person, are negative self-statements or anxieties.
I want you to just let that sink in for a second. 50,000 thoughts. If the majority of those are negative, that is a massive amount of corrupted code running in the background.
It's consuming all your processing power.
Right. It's generating errors in your decision-making, and you probably aren't even aware it's happening.
Exactly. And to debug this, Sachtev provides a brilliant case study of a man named Amit. Now, Amit is a VP of sales. On paper, his resume is totally flawless. He has his targets, his team respects him. But internally, Amit is battling a crippling case of imposter syndrome.
The classic fake it till you make it struggle.
Yeah, he has this constant background script running that says, I'm not cut out for this. They're going to find out I'm a fraud.
We have all been there. It's the waiting for the other shoe to drop mentality. But I want to push back a little here because when people hear change your internal dialogue, it sounds a lot like toxic positivity to me. It sounds like just standing in front of a mirror and lying to yourself. How is Sachdev's approach mechanically different from that?
That is a crucial distinction to make. Fake it till you make it is entirely superficial. It ignores the underlying neural wiring. Your brain knows when you're lying to it.
Right.
If Emmett just looked in the mirror and said, I am the greatest salesman in the world, his subconscious would reject it immediately. It creates cognitive dissonance.
Because there's no proof.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Sachdev's three-phase NLP protocol is entirely different because it's engineered. Phase 1 is affirmations, but they have to be carefully constructed.
Yeah.
Amit had to write intentional self-talk that was both positive and undeniably true to his brain.
So what did he use instead?
He replaced the corrupted script with, I am a capable and strategic leader who adapts to challenges. His brain could accept that because he had historical data to prove he was adaptable.
Okay, so he patches the code with believable, structurally sound language. What is phase 2?
Phase 2 is visualization. He mentally rehearsed walking into high-stakes meetings with authority. But again, it's not just daydreaming. In NLP, effective visualization involves engaging all the senses.
Making it tactile.
Very tactile. Amit had to visualize the weight of the conference room chair, the sound of his own steady voice, the visual cues of his colleagues nodding. By doing this in a highly relaxed state, he was literally creating new neural pathways in a safe, simulated environment. The brain actually struggles to tell the difference between a vividly imagined event and a real one in terms of neural firing.
That is fascinating. I mean, athletes do this all the time, right? Skiers visualizing the slalom course before they drop in, but it's so rarely applied to the boardroom.
Precisely. We leave that optimization out of the office,
Uh-huh.
and then we get to phase 3, which is arguably the most critical part of this, reframing. Amit had a specific memory of a past product launch that failed miserably early in his career.
His brain kept pulling that up.
Yes, his brain was using that memory as a primary reference file, essentially as proof of inadequacy. Every time he faced a new challenge, his brain pulled that specific file. Using the protocols in the text, Amit systematically reframed that memory.
How does one actually do that mechanically? You can't just delete a memory.
No, you definitely can't delete it, but you can change how it's categorized. Think of it like a filing cabinet.
Mm.
Amit took the file out, stripped away the emotional baggage, the shame, the embarrassment, and recategorized the objective facts of the event simply as a valuable data point for growth.
He changed the tag.
He literally changed the tag on the file from error to update. He extracted the lessons about market timing and team communication and discarded the emotion.
He removed the malware but kept the data.
Exactly. And what is so vital for you listening to understand is how precisely Knavsak Dev maps out these internal dialogues. We are summarizing Amit's debugging process here for time, but the manual contains dozens of these linguistic debugging tools, complete with the exact syntax and the timing you need to use.
You can't just wing it.
You really can. The mechanics of reframing require specific questions and prompts that guide your brain out of the emotional state and into the analytical state.
Right, which is why having the book is so important. You need the actual schematics to do the rewiring safely. So we've talked about debugging the internal code, those 50,000 thoughts. Now let's talk about the output. How does this code translate into physical action? Because subconscious patterning and habitual loops dictate almost everything we do throughout the day.
We really run on autopilot.
We do. We like to think we are making conscious choices, but mostly we're just a collection of automated routines.
And often, those routines are actively working against us. Let's examine the clinical case of Kavita. She's a consulting manager in the book, and she was trapped in a severe procrastination loop.
Oh, I think a lot of people listening are going to relate to Kavita.
Absolutely. Whenever Kavita faced a complex, cognitively demanding task like drafting a quarterly strategy deck, she defaulted to checking her email.
Classic.
And it wasn't a conscious choice. Her brain was seeking the cheap, immediate dopamine of a simple task like clearing an inbox to avoid the heavy cognitive load of the complex task. It was an automated, deeply ingrained, unproductive pattern.
We have all been Kavita. You sit down to do the big strategy deck, and suddenly reorganizing your desktop folders or checking Slack feels like the most urgent, productive thing in the entire world. It's a trick the brain plays. So how did she break it?
Sakdev outlines a mechanical, four-step protocol to interrupt and overwrite this loop. Step 1, identifying the trigger. This requires a level of mindfulness that most people just don't practice. For Kavita, the trigger wasn't the project itself. It was the physical sensation of feeling overwhelmed. It was a slight tightness in her chest when she looked at the blank slide deck.
Interesting. So once she identified that physical trigger, what was step 2?
Step 2 is interrupting the pattern. You cannot just rely on willpower to stop a subconscious loop. Willpower burns out. You have to physically disrupt the neural firing. Kavita used what Sakdev calls the stop technique.
What does that look like?
It's a physical and mental pattern interrupt. The moment she felt that tightness in her chest and the urge to open her email, she would physically push her chair back from the desk, say the word stop out loud, and disrupt the automated sequence. It literally halts the execution of the subconscious script.
It's like throwing a stick into the spokes of a spinning bicycle wheel. It forces the system to crash and halt. But stopping the bad habit isn't enough, right? Nature abhors a vacuum. You have to put something else in its place.
Exactly. Which brings us to step 3, creating new patterns through anchoring. Kavita had to associate sitting at her desk with intense focus, not avoidance, so she utilized the science of anchoring. When she was in a state of high focus, perhaps working on something she genuinely enjoyed, she would pair that feeling with 3 deep breaths and a specific physical gesture. In her case, she would press her thumb and forefinger together firmly.
Okay, can we pause on anchoring for a second? Because this sounds a bit like Pavlov's dogs, but applied to yourself. Does pressing your fingers together actually do anything?
Yes, it absolutely does, and it relies entirely on associative learning. By repeatedly pairing a specific, unique physical gesture with an intense state of resourcefulness or focus, you're creating a neurological bridge. You are wiring those neurons together. Eventually, simply firing the physical anchor, pressing those fingers together, will automatically trigger the associated cognitive state.
So it's a neurological shortcut.
That's exactly what it is. So when Kavita sat down at her desk to do the hard deck, she would press her fingers together, fire the anchor, and flood her system with a feeling of focus.
That is incredible. And step 4.
Step 4 is future pacing. She mentally rehearsed upcoming scenarios. She would visualize sitting down on a Friday afternoon, feeling the urge to procrastinate, firing her anchor, and successfully completing the deck. She preloaded the desired behavior into her neural pathways so that when the real situation occurred, her brain already had a successful script to run.
But I really want to stress to you listening, this requires precision. You can't just press your fingers together once and expect to be a productivity machine. It requires repetition and the exact timing detailed in the Socrates protocols to actually forge that anchor. It's pure behavioral architecture.
Yes, the timing is everything.
And understanding this architecture leads us perfectly into the concept of the congruence model and crafting a leadership identity. I want to dismantle a massive myth right now. Great leaders are not born. They aren't magically endowed with charisma. Their personas are meticulously sculpted, engineered constructs. It is a deliberate design. But when that design is flawed, when the pieces don't match, you get incongruence.
And the cost of incongruence in a leadership position is catastrophic. The text details the case study of Rahul, who was a chief operating officer. Rahul's stated core values, the ones he put on the company website, the ones he talked about in all-hands meetings, were transparency and teamwork. That was his public narrative.
But what was his actual behavior?
His actual mechanical output, his daily actions, were micromanaging his direct reports and withholding critical financial information.
That is a massive disconnect. And let me guess, his team saw right through it.
Immediately. This is cognitive dissonance at the highest level. The clinical symptoms of this incongruence were devastating. His employees were severely disengaged, turnover was high, and here's the most interesting part. Rahul himself was plagued by severe self-doubt. He was exhausted all the time.
Why? Just from keeping up the act?
Because his brain knew he was running conflicting programs. It takes a tremendous amount of cognitive energy to maintain a facade that contradicts your actual behavior. Your brain is constantly fighting itself.
So how do we fix the code? Because a traditional HR intervention would just tell Rahul to communicate better or take a management seminar. But Socrates goes deeper. He provides a rigorous 6-phase congruence protocol.
Yes, and this is where the difference between a functional manager and a transformational architect becomes glaringly obvious. A manager oversees processes. An architect designs the reality their team operates within. Rahul used Socrates' systematic protocol to realign his internal values with his external actions. Phase 1 is identifying core values, but doing it using specific NLP extraction techniques.
It's not just picking nice words from a list.
No, it's discovering what actually drives your subconscious.
And phase 2 is crafting a new, aligned leadership narrative based on those extracted values. Phase 3 is setting personal, highly measurable goals for congruence. If transparency is the value, the measurable goal is sharing the quarterly budget breakdown with the department heads by Friday.
Correct. You make it actionable. Phase 4 is integrating those values into daily mechanical actions. Phase 5 is practicing extreme clinical self-reflection and actively seeking 360-degree feedback. You have to measure your actual output against your designed blueprint.
You check the code for errors.
Exactly. And finally, Phase 6 is using NLP, specifically the affirmations and visualization techniques we discussed with Amit, to reinforce the new identity hardware.
Rahul didn't just try to be better, he followed a blueprint. And this is exactly why having Socrates' text is so critical. We are flying through this 6-phase protocol right now, but the extraction of core values alone requires a deep dive into the specific NLP exercises outlined in the book. If you try to guess your core values, you likely just pick what you think sounds good, and you'll end up right back where Rahul started.
You'll build a house on sand. Now, we've spent a lot of time optimizing the individual leader, but leadership doesn't happen in a vacuum. We have to optimize the network. We need to look at engineering team dynamics. Socrates points out something crucial. Teams have subconscious filters too. Specifically, he highlights the toward filter versus the away from filter.
I found this section of the manual absolutely fascinating. Let's define these. A toward person is goal-oriented. They are motivated by what they can gain. They want to move toward a reward, a success, a specific metric. An away from person is fundamentally risk-averse. They are motivated by avoiding pain, avoiding failure, or avoiding a loss.
Which raises an incredibly important question for you to consider about your own team. What happens when these two operating systems clash on the same project?
Chaos.
Complete chaos. The text provides a perfect case study with two leaders, James and Alicia. James is the head of product development. His metaprogram is deeply away from. He fears risk. He constantly wants to delay the product launch to ensure absolute perfection, and he is terrified of a public product failure.
And then you have Alicia, the marketing lead. Her meta program is intensely toward. She wants a rapid launch. She's motivated by capturing market share. She thrives on speed and momentum. The friction between these two wasn't just a disagreement. It was two incompatible operating systems trying to read the exact same file. It was destroying team dynamic.
A traditional manager would step into this conflict and just demand a compromise. They would say, Alicia, give James 2 more weeks, and James, you have to launch after that. But compromise usually leaves both parties feeling frustrated and misunderstood. Sarah, the overarching leader in this scenario, acted as a behavioral architect. She used NLP reframing and precision language to intervene.
Walk us through how she actually did that, because she basically had to act like a translator, right?
Precisely. She shifted their perception. She didn't let them fight over speed versus perfection, because that's an unwinnable battle. Instead, she used precision language to reframe the conflict into a shared goal. She translated Alicia's toward language into terms James could process.
How so?
She told James Alicia's push for a rapid launch is actually the best way to avoid losing market relevance and prevent our competitors from stealing our thunder. She used his away from triggers to motivate him toward Alicia's goal.
Oh, that is brilliant. She framed speed as a way to avoid pain.
Yes. And she did the exact reverse for Alicia. She framed James's desire for perfection testing as the ultimate way to move toward a flawless reputation and 5-star reviews. She didn't change their personalities. She just formatted the data so their specific hardware could read it.
It's literal behavioral engineering. And Sarah didn't just use language. She used the mechanics of rapport. The manual details another leader, Alex, who used the physical mechanics of NLP, specifically mirroring and matching, to build subconscious trust with his team.
This is a highly clinical application of NLP. Building rapport isn't just about making small talk about the weekend. Mirroring and matching involves subtly aligning your physiology with the person you are communicating with. It means subtly matching their posture, their tonal frequency, the speed of their speech, and even their breathing rate.
I have to interject here because when people hear mirroring, they imagine copying someone like a mime, which sounds incredibly creepy and manipulative. How do you do this without the other person thinking you're just mocking them?
It has to be incredibly subtle, and Sukhdev addresses this directly. You use what's called cross-mirroring. If they're tapping their foot, you don't tap your foot. You might subtly tap your pen to the same rhythm. If they speak slowly and softly, you lower your volume and slow your cadence. Alex used this specifically to engage the introverted members of his engineering team who were constantly being drowned out by the louder personalities.
So by lowering his energy to match theirs, what was actually happening in their brains mechanically?
He was activating their mirror neurons. By matching their physiological state, he bypassed their conscious defenses and established a subconscious neurological bridge. He was sending a biological signal that said, I am like you are safe with me. Once that subconscious trust is established, they become incredibly open to sharing their ideas.
That perfectly transitions us into the mechanics of influence, persuasion, and visionary leadership. I want to clear something up immediately. We need to strip away any negative, manipulative connotations you might have about the word persuasion. In the context of Sukhdev's system, influence is simply ethical behavioral alignment. It is ensuring that your team's hardware is processing the vision correctly. You aren't tricking them. You are removing the friction that prevents them from seeing the value of the vision.
Let's look at Maya's case study to illustrate this. Maya was tasked with leading her logistics team through a massive, terrifying process automation change. The team's default response was intense fear of obsolescence. They thought the robots were coming for their jobs. Maya utilized the NLP technique of anchoring positive states in others.
And she didn't do this by just sending out a cheerful memo saying, automation is great.
No, that would break rapport completely. She started by clinically acknowledging the fear, matching their state to build trust. Then, she used a specific linguistic tool detailed heavily in the manual, metaphor. She framed the automation transition not as a replacement of their skills, but as switching from a manual to an automatic car.
That metaphor is literally a piece of code. Think about what that does to the brain. It chunks down the terrifying complexity of enterprise automation into a universally understood experience. Everyone understands driving an automatic car. It's easier. It doesn't replace the driver. It just frees up your attention from shifting gears so you can focus on navigating.
Exactly. She anchored the relief and excitement of an upgrade to the impending change. She systematically recoded their anxiety into curiosity.
What's fascinating here is how SACDEV breaks down adapting this kind of communication to diverse audiences. A true behavioral architect tailors the linguistic code to the listener's specific hardware. You can't use the same metaphor for everyone.
The manual provides incredibly detailed schematics on communicating across generational lines. Think about the massive difference in operating systems between baby boomers, Gen X, millennials, Gen Z, and now Gen Alpha. Their baseline metaprograms are formed by completely different historical and technological eras. You also have departmental differences. You cannot use the same linguistic syntax with the sales team that you use with the IT department or HR. Their daily realities filter information differently. To truly master this multi-layered communication, to be able to seamlessly switch between the language of your young engineers and your veteran board members, you have to study the generational and departmental breakdowns provided in the book.
Okay, so we have all these tools for times of growth and transition. But what does this all mean when the system is under extreme stress, when everything goes wrong? That brings us to architecting resilience and navigating change. Resilience is often treated as this mystical aura. You either have it or you don't. SACDEV rejects that completely. He defines resilience as a composite of 4 mechanical pillars: grit, adaptability, emotional intelligence, and mindfulness. It is a structural reinforcement of the mind that can be actively built.
And when you need rapid structural change to deal with a sudden shock, the manual introduces something called the swish pattern. This is a highly advanced, incredibly potent NLP tool.
I really want us to take our time here because the swish pattern is one of the most powerful things in the book. What exactly is it used for?
It is used to instantaneously replace a negative knee-jerk reaction, like the paralyzing fear of a massive organizational shift, with a positive, resourceful state, like curiosity or confidence. It utilizes the brain's visual processing centers to literally scramble an old neural pathway and forge a new one.
Listener, I want you to try a micro version of this with us right now, just to understand the mechanics. Think of a minor trigger that causes you stress at work. Maybe it's the ping of a specific Slack channel or seeing a particular client's name in your inbox. Got it. Okay, expert, walk us through the mechanics of the swish.
First, you visualize that negative trigger clearly in your mind's eye. See the client's name in the inbox. Notice the feeling of dread associated with it. Now, in the bottom corner of that mental image, visualize a small, dark, postage stamp-sized image of how you want to react. Let's say you leaning back in your chair, smiling, feeling completely in control and confident.
Okay, I have the big stress image and the tiny confident image in the corner.
Now the swish. In your mind, accompanied by the physical sound swish, you rapidly expand that tiny confident image until it explodes and completely covers and shatters the stressful image. The confident image becomes huge, bright, and colorful. The stressful image is gone. You hold that positive feeling for a moment, then clear your mental screen.
Swish! Wow, even just doing that quickly, you feel a shift in your physical state.
Now imagine doing that repetition 10, 20 times in a row. You are literally exhausting the old neural pathway and forcing the brain to associate the initial trigger with the new, bright, confident image. By repeating this rapid visual replacement, the brain eventually autocorrects.
We see this applied on both macro and micro scales in the text. On a macro level, the book analyzes Mary Barra at General Motors navigating the devastating 2008 financial crisis. She utilized extreme transparency and accountability, which are core tenets of the congruence model we discussed earlier, to structurally reinforce the entire organization during a massive stress test. She didn't hide the reality. She reframed the crisis as a necessary evolution.
And on a micro level, we have the case study of TechCorp. They were navigating a highly painful transition to an agile framework. The development teams were terrified of the new expectations. The leadership at TechCorp employed the swish pattern and future pacing to systematically rewire the anxiety of the teams. During daily stand-ups, they preloaded the vision of a streamlined, efficient, less stressful future. They actively swished the fear of the new software away and replaced it with the image of leaving work on time because the agile system was working.
But again, I have to be clear. Mastering advanced techniques like the swish pattern or future pacing isn't something you can just hear about on a deep dive once and execute perfectly on your team tomorrow. These are delicate cognitive procedures. They require studying the exact step-by-step instructions, the pacing, and the troubleshooting guides laid out in SOCDEV's manual. We are outlining the capabilities of the system, but the manual is the user guide you absolutely must have to operate it safely and effectively.
It's like knowing what a scalpel does versus actually performing the surgery. You need the manual.
Exactly. Okay, let's look at the final piece of the puzzle. Integrating the system. How do we take these individual cognitive protocols we've discussed, the switch patterns, the anchors, the reframing, and scale them to architect an entire organizational culture?
It begins with fostering psychological safety. But again, mechanically, not just conceptually. A lot of companies say they have a safe environment, but their systems punish risk. SOCDev explains the mechanics of redefining creative spaces and utilizing design thinking. He cites IBM's innovation revolution as the prime example here.
What did IBM do differently?
They systematically dismantled the evasion. Away from fear of failure at an institutional level, they built an environment where failure was literally recoded. It wasn't just a poster on the wall saying fail forward. They changed the reporting structures. When a prototype failed, it wasn't recorded as a loss. It was processed in the system merely as data. It was an update, not an error. This is how you build a culture that iterates rapidly without the teams breaking down from anxiety. The structure itself absorbs the shock.
And that scales directly into the legacy blueprint outlined in the final chapters of the manual. A true architect doesn't just build for today. They design a structure that remains standing long after they have left the building. This involves creating a resilient leadership pipeline, utilizing the clinical mechanics of mentorship, not just giving advice, but transferring these NLP operating systems to your juniors. It's about aligning personal and organizational values so profoundly that your influence projects far beyond the company's borders. It's about writing code that continues to run, debug, and optimize itself automatically.
Which raises an incredibly important question, and it is really the crux of everything Kanavsev has engineered in this system. If your internal dialogue is the code that writes your reality, what reality are you currently coding for your team without even realizing it? Are you writing bugs into their operating system through your own incongruence, your unmanaged stress states, and your corrupted linguistic habits?
That is the ultimate provocative thought for you to take away today. What reality are you coding? Because you are coding one, whether you are doing it consciously or not. Let's do a value recap here. We have covered a massive amount of behavioral architecture and psychological engineering in this deep dive. We've gone from decoding the neuroplasticity of the brain and rewriting neural pathways to debugging internal dialogue and imposter syndrome. We've talked about rewriting habitual loops to kill procrastination, aligning your leadership congruence, resolving team conflict through metaprogram translation, and architecting organizational resilience with tools like the swish pattern. I want to sincerely thank you for enduring this intensive deep dive into the true mechanics of leadership.
But listen closely to this final point. What we have discussed today is just the scaffolding. To permanently rewire your subconscious, to truly master these complex systems, and to stop operating on faulty default factory settings, you must acquire the complete instructions. You need the actual field manual. Go right now to Amazon, Google Play, or any leading book retailer and buy Human Potential Unlocked. NLP Strategies for Leaders in a Dynamic Workplace by Kanavsev. Furthermore, I highly recommend that you immerse yourself in the official audiobook version, which is available now on Spotify and Google Play. Listening to the linguistic programming exactly as it was designed to be heard will accelerate your absorption of the material exponentially. Do not try to build this architecture without the blueprint. Get the book.
Get the book, get the audiobook, and start writing better code for yourself and your team. Thank you for joining us today. We are officially signing off from the Transformation Roadmap series here on The Deep Dive.